to everyone who found their way to this channel and subscribed and will see this video. I promised I'd make some tutorials on Asante casting, so here it goes. This is the first video of many and is introductory to the rest of the tutorials. After multiple failures at gravity casting with professional investment, I decided to go as low-tech as possible and stumbled across a video showing a combined crucible and mold technique called Asante casting. This method is an ancient African brass casting technique, typically used to make statues. It lacked the fine detail I needed for jewelry, and I wasn't able to get the same materials that are typically used, so I modified it to work with what I had. I latched onto this method because of how low-tech it was, since it required no professional tools. Why Asante casting? Well, when it comes to jewelry, lost wax casting is the easiest way to create a complex shape in whichever metal of your choice. However, there are several forms of lost wax casting, and which you use is dependent on what resources are available to you and how much money you're willing to spend, which is where the big advantage of this one comes in that it's extremely low cost. I like to compare my methods to professional casting techniques if I can. I want to get as close as I can. Most commonly, vacuum or centrifugal casting is used. Since the purpose of this video is to explain why and the procedures of Asante casting, I won't go into great detail of those other methods. Suffice to say, what I make has a worse surface finish. I'm working on improving that, and professional techniques have far better surface finishes. My mold requires separate layers and takes at least a day to form those layers, which is why I would recommend combining molds to make rings. I'll do a more detailed video on each component, but in this I'm just providing the overview. First, we make a wax ring pattern. I use Jewel's ring wax, of which there are many supplies, and it comes in a few forms that hold fine detail differently. When it comes to rings, I prefer green tube wax, because it holds what's carved into it quite well. I use a jeweler's saw and a bench knife to carve out my ring. The sprue and gating are also made of wax and attached to the ring pattern. Once embedded in the mold material and burned out, this will provide a path for the metal to flow through. Specifically, the sprue is the tapered entry. There is also often risers added to allow air in the mold to rise out of the mold, leaving the pattern intact. However, in this method, I've found they are unnecessary. Next, I mix china clay and sand into a thin slurry. The clay acts as a binder, holding the mold together, while the sand functions as grog, preventing the clay from shrinking as it dries, leaving cracks in the mold. The original method calls for using regular impure clay and charcoal, but this would ruin the finish even further on jewelry, and the original method was intended for statues. Once the inner mold has dried fully, I mix fire clay, sand, and dried grass. This is added to the ring over half a day. Once dry, it's ready to be burned out. I burn the wax out at 200 degrees Celsius in a home oven. This is vastly colder than any professional investment method, and as the mold is brought to a much higher temperature later, it doesn't even matter if there's some unburnt wax remaining in the mold. I just burn out most of it. The crucible is then filled with the necessary amount of bronze to form the ring, plus a little extra to be sure it fills the pattern completely. Now the mold is sealed upside down to the crucible with more fire clay and sand. Once dry, the whole mold can be placed into the furnace. One of my tutorial videos will be how I went about making my furnace, but suffice to say for now, it's nothing but clay, sand, wood chips, a steel can, and a run-reel burner. After 45 minutes of heating, the furnace reaches 1300 Celsius. It's time to cast. The mold is taken out of the furnace with some tongs, flipped over, and shaken a little before being returned to the furnace to allow it to cool. Once cold, the mold is removed and a hammer can be used to get the metal ring, being careful not to damage the crucible in the process. Finishing, the process of refining the metal object, takes about 90 minutes. The sprue is first cut off with a hacksaw. The finishing can be done with first needle files, then progressively finer sandpaper, until the ring has a smooth finish. Polishing is then simply done with a cloth. Congratulations, you now have a ring. There's more to it than what I've said here, but we'll cover those in later videos. That's the overall process. Subscribe for more videos and feel free to ask questions in the comments. Or if you're too shy, send me a message on YouTube or Reddit.